95,000, not a few hundred, not a few thousand, 95,000 photographs sitting inside a congressional archive right now, and the public has seen fewer than 100 of them. That number, 95,000, is the number that members of the House Oversight Committee have been sitting with since the estate of Jeffrey Epstein turned over its entire photographic archive to Congress in December of 2025. It is the number that tells you everything about why this story will not go away, why attorneys general get subpoenaed, why lawmakers walk out of closed-door briefings, and why, more than 3 months after the first photos dropped, the most disturbing images in that archive still have not been released to the American public. Here is the problem with the official version of events as it has been presented. The government told the public that it released the Epstein Files. It told the public it complied with the law. It told the public there was nothing more to see. And then, one by one, investigators found the missing pages. Investigators found the withheld interviews. Investigators found the documents that were briefly posted and then quietly pulled down. And they found the FBI interview files, 3 of them, that were specifically missing from the public database. The 3 interviews that happened to name the current president of the United States. That is not a coincidence. And that is what this video is about. Before any of the evidence, before any of the documents, before the photos and the timelines and the congressional subpoenas, we need to understand who this story is actually about. Because every time Jeffrey Epstein becomes a political football, every time his name is used as a weapon or a shield between 2 parties, the people who actually matter in this story get buried. And those people are the survivors. Girls who were recruited, trafficked and abused by a man who moved through the most powerful rooms in the world for decades. Girls from Eastern Europe whose passports ended up in a digital archive on Epstein's computer. Girls whose FBI interview notes went missing from a government database. Women who gave their testimonies to federal investigators for times for separate interviews, and watched as those interviews were quietly coded as duplicates and left out of the public release. This story is about them. Everything else, the photos, the documents, the congressional theater is only worth examining because it tells us how a man like Epstein operated for so long without anyone with power doing anything to stop him. If you want to follow this case with the depth that mainstream coverage is not giving it, subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Every major development in the Epstein files, the Bondi subpoena, the missing documents, we are tracking all of it. And drop a comment below. Do you believe the Department of Justice has released everything it is legally required to release? Because the evidence suggests the answer is no. Now, let's talk about what 95,000 photographs actually means, because that number requires context. Most people have a few thousand photos on their phones. Family events, vacations, moments they want to remember. 95,000 photographs, spanning decades, stored on a single person's computers and email servers is not casual documentation. That is systematic, deliberate, methodical record-keeping. Jeffrey Epstein photographed his world obsessively. He kept images of every powerful person who passed through his orbit. At his New York townhouse on East 71st Street, at his Palm Beach estate, at his Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, on his private island in the United States Virgin Islands known as Little St. James. Finance, politics, science, entertainment, royalty, every major gathering, every dinner party, every flight on his private jet was a potential opportunity for documentation. The question investigators have asked, and the question the archive itself raises, is why. Documentation can be leverage. It can be insurance. It can be a kind of power that operates quietly in the background. I have photographs of everyone, and everyone knows I have photographs of everyone. Whatever the purpose was, the 95,000 photographs are now in the hands of a congressional committee. And that changes everything. The first batch of photographs was released by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee on December 12, 2025. 19 photographs out of 95,000. That first release included images of the current President of the United States, Donald Trump, standing alongside Epstein. It included Trump posing with 6 women, their faces redacted by the committee. It included former President Bill Clinton photographed alongside Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell intervenes in what appears to find photograph Clinton's own signature visible on the image. The kind of signed photograph you give someone you consider a friend. It included Steve Bannon sitting across a desk from Epstein in what appears to be an intentional meeting setting, not a party backdrop, not a chance encounter, and a mirror selfie of Bannon and Epstein together. It included Bill Gates, Larry Summers, who served as Treasury Secretary under Clinton and as President of Harvard University from 2001 to 2006. Alan Dershowitz, who was not merely a social acquaintance of Epstein's, but a member of the legal team that negotiated the 2008 non-prosecution agreement. The deal that allowed Epstein to plead guilty to comparatively lesser state charges and serve 13 months in a county jail, with work release rather than face federal sex trafficking charges. Richard Branson, Woody Allen, Prince Andrew, now stripped of his royal and military titles and living as a private citizen following a civil settlement with Virginia Giuffre, who alleged Andrew sexually abused her on multiple occasions when she was 17. None of those 19 photographs showed illegal activity. The committee made that clear. What they showed was something else entirely, the architecture of Epstein's access to power. He was not on the periphery of these worlds. He was at the center of them. And the photographs were the record of that centrality. The White House responded immediately. A spokesperson described the release as cherry-picked photos with random redactions designed to create a false narrative. Republicans on the committee called it a hoax. Both of those responses are worth examining carefully because they contain something true and something that does not hold up. It is true that 19 photographs out of 95,000 is a selection. It is true that any selection involves choices. It is true that Democrats have a political interest in releasing photographs that are maximally embarrassing to the sitting president. All of that is accurate. But here is what the cherry-picking complaint does not address. The 95,000 photographs exist. Democrats have stated they have reviewed approximately 75% of them. Congressman Robert Garcia, the ranking Democrat on the committee, said publicly that some of the unreleased photographs are, in his word, disturbing. More specifically, he told reporters that the most disturbing images are those that are more sexual in nature, and that the committee was in active conversation with survivors' attorneys about how to handle their release responsibly. A committee member, Congressman Dave Min of California, confirmed that survivors had been consulted about the process specifically to avoid re-traumatizing them. That is not the behavior of a committee manufacturing a false narrative. That is the behavior of investigators who have found something in that archive that requires careful handling. The Republican answer to the existence of 95,000 photographs was not, "Here is the full picture. Here is what the rest of the archive shows. Here is how the 19 photos misrepresent what is there." The Republican answer was, "Do not look at those 19 photographs. The selection was unfair." That is a deflection. 19 real photographs of real people in real relationships are still 19 real photographs, regardless of how many others remain unreleased. 6 days later, on December 18th, Democrats released another batch. This time, 68 more photographs. And this second release was qualitatively different from the first. Not just more prominent faces in party settings, but something darker. Multiple images of a woman's body on which lines from Vladimir Nabokov's novel Lolita had been written, on her foot, her hip, her spine, her chest. Lolita, the novel about a man's sexual obsession with a 12-year-old girl. Photographs of passports and identification documents belonging to women from Ukraine, the Russian Federation, South Africa, Italy, the Czech Republic and Lithuania, all identifying information redacted. Screenshots of text messages that appeared to involve a discussion about recruiting a young woman to meet Epstein, one message reading. According to reporting by ABC News, references to an 18-year-old from Russia and what appears to be a price per girl. Photographs of Epstein with Noam Chomsky, the philosopher and linguist. Photographs of Epstein pointing out of an aircraft window, a woman seated next to him, her face covered. Photographs showing architectural plans for Epstein's island estate in the Virgin Islands. And an image of lines from Lolita written on a woman's body. That detail, the Lolita quotes, deserves to be stated plainly. Whoever wrote those words on a woman's body and photographed it was communicating something. The choice of that specific novel, that specific literary reference in that specific context, is not ambiguous. It tells you something about how Epstein and those around him understood what they were doing, not as crime, as a kind of dark aesthetic, documented and stored. Here is where the investigation becomes something more than political combat between two parties. Here is where it becomes a story about what was actually in those files and what the government chose not to release. On January 30th, 2026, the Department of Justice released what it described as its compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the law that Congress passed in November 2025, signed by President Trump the following day, which gave the Justice Department 30 days to release all of its investigative files related to Epstein. The DOJ released over 3 million pages of documents, 180,000 images, and approximately 2,000 videos. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche stated publicly that the release brought the department into full compliance with the law. Attorney General Pam Bondi said the department was proud of the work it had done. More than 500 attorneys and reviewers had spent thousands of hours painstakingly going through millions of pages. But investigators who reviewed the public database found something that a claim of full compliance cannot explain. They found missing pages. They found documents that were catalogued, assigned unique serial numbers in the FBI's case management system, but were not present in what the DOJ had released to the public. An NPR investigation published on February 24, 2026, identified what appeared to be more than 50 missing pages of FBI interview records. The pages that were missing were specifically associated with a woman who had made allegations about Jeffrey Epstein and who had also, in subsequent FBI interviews, made uncorroborated allegations about the current president of the United States. The FBI had interviewed that woman for times between July and October of 2019. For views, only one memo, the first one, in which she did not mention Trump, was present in the public database. The other 3 interviews were not there. The Justice Department's initial explanation was that the missing documents had been mistakenly coded as duplicates during the review process. But investigators immediately noted what the cherry-picking complaint had failed to note. Of all the documents that could have been accidentally coded as duplicates across 3 million pages, the ones that went missing were specifically the 3 interviews in which a witness had named the sitting president. When pressed on this, a Justice Department official said the files would be reposted. They were eventually released in early March of 2026 after sustained congressional and media pressure. But the release of those 3 interview summaries did not answer the underlying question. It raised new ones, according to CNN's reporting on the documents, which were published on March 5, 2026, the woman told FBI agents that Epstein had repeatedly abused her beginning when she was approximately 13 years old. She said he drove her and flew her to either New York or New Jersey at some point when she was between 13 and 15 years old, to what she described as a very tall building. According to the FBI interview record, it was there that Epstein introduced her to Trump. According to NPR's review of those documents, which the outlet had obtained and reviewed before the DOJ republished them, the woman alleged that what followed constituted a sexual assault. She told investigators she bit her attacker and was struck in the head and told to leave. She described two additional interactions with Trump but declined to detail them further, telling investigators she questioned what the point would be of providing more information when there was a strong possibility nothing could be done about it. These are uncorroborated allegations. Trump has denied all wrongdoing related to Epstein. He has never been charged with any crime in connection with these claims. The FBI email included in the released files noted that one identified victim claimed abuse by Trump but ultimately refused to cooperate, without specifying whether that referred to the same woman. The Epstein Victims Compensation Program, which independently reviewed claims from survivors, found that the woman identified as Jane Doe in a related lawsuit was deemed ineligible to receive compensation. She subsequently settled and voluntarily dismissed her case. None of that resolves the question of what happened. What it establishes is that a witness made these allegations to federal investigators for separate occasions. That those for interview records ended up missing from the public database. That only the interview in which Trump was not mentioned was initially posted, and that the government's explanation, accidental duplication coding, applies uniquely and precisely to the documents that named the current president. That pattern does not make the allegations true, but it does make the omission, in the technical investigative sense, anomalous. Meanwhile, the pressure on the Justice Department was building from an unexpected direction. Republicans, 5 members of the House Office Committee, Tim Burchett, Lauren Boebert, Michael Cloud, Nancy Mace and Scott Perry, voted on March 4, 2026, alongside Democrats to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi for a sworn deposition before the committee on April 14th. The vote was 24-19. Congresswoman Mace, who forced the vote, stated publicly that the Epstein case is one of the greatest cover-ups in American history and that 3 million documents have been released and yet the full truth has not emerged. Videos are missing. Audio is missing. Logs are missing. There are millions more documents out there. That statement came from a Republican, from a member of the president's own party, voting to subpoena the president's own attorney general. That is not a partisan political strategy. That is something closer to a bipartisan acknowledgement that the release of the files, despite its enormous scale, was not complete. The day after the committee voted to subpoena Bondi, the Justice Department released the 3 previously withheld FBI interview summaries. The timing of that release, coming within 24 hours of the subpoena vote, was noted by multiple congressional observers. Democrats on the committee said in a statement that the release confirmed the files had been illegally withheld, and that millions more pages still remain concealed. On March 17th, the committee officially issued the subpoena requiring Bondi to appear for a sworn deposition on April 14th. On March 18th, Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche arrived on Capitol Hill for what the Justice Department had framed as a goodwill briefing, an opportunity to answer lawmakers' questions and build confidence that the department had handled the Epstein files appropriately. Within 30 minutes, every Democratic member of the House Oversight Committee had walked out of the room. Congressman Garcia, speaking to reporters outside, called the session a fake hearing, He said Bondi was not under oath. She had not provided an opening statement, and she would not commit to honoring the subpoena for her sworn April testimony. Garcia stated that what was happening was outrageous, infuriating, and a continuation of what he called the White House's cover-up of the Epstein Files. Republican Chairman James Comer described the Democratic walkout as premeditated, a political game. He said the first 3 Democrats to ask questions had only complained about the format rather than seeking information. Representative Summer Lee of Pennsylvania, a Democrat, confirmed to reporters that she had asked Comer directly whether he would compel Bondi to comply with the subpoena and initiate contempt proceedings if she failed to appear under oath. Comer confirmed the exchange. His response to her question, he acknowledged, was that Democrats were wasting everyone's time. Bondi, emerging from the briefing, told reporters she would follow the law regarding the subpoena. She said the department was proud of its work on the Epstein Files. The Department of Justice issued a statement calling the subpoena completely unnecessary, noting that more than 500 attorneys and reviewers had spent thousands of hours on the release. Here is what that response does not address. The Epstein Files Transparency Act gave the Justice Department 30 days to release all of its investigative files. The department missed the December 19th deadline. It then released 3 million pages in late January, but said it would withhold the remaining files, more than 2.5 million additional documents. Media outlets subsequently reported that the department had pulled documents from the public database after initial publication, sometimes without explanation, sometimes citing victim flagging requests, sometimes offering no stated reason. The 3 missing FBI interview summaries, the ones containing allegations about Trump, were eventually republished only after an independent investigation by NPR identified their absence and after Congress voted to subpoena the Attorney General. Somewhere between the law's mandate and the department's execution of it, specific documents went missing. The documents that went missing named the president. That is the investigation that is still unresolved as of March 23, 2026. Let's step back and look at the full pattern, not individual incidents, not one missing document or one walked-out briefing, the full arc. November 18, 2025, Congress passes the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Trump signs it the following day, having campaigned on transparency around the Epstein case. December 19th, the law's deadline for the DOJ to release all files. The department releases a limited batch drawing criticism from both parties. December 12th and 18th, Democrats on the House Oversight Committee release a total of approximately 90 photographs from the 95,000 in the estate archive, including images of Trump, Clinton, Bannon, Gates, Summers, Dershowitz, Branson, Allen, Chomsky, and the Lilith-inscribed photographs. January 30th, 2026, DOJ releases over 3 million pages, 180,000 images and approximately 2,000 videos and declares compliance. February 24th, NPR publishes its investigation identifying more than 50 missing pages of FBI interview records, specifically those related to a woman who alleged both Epstein and Trump abused her as a minor. March 4th, the House Oversight Committee votes 24-19 to subpoena Bondi. March 5th, the DOJ releases the 3 previously withheld FBI interview summaries 1 day after the subpoena vote. March 17th, the formal subpoena is issued, requiring Bondi's sworn testimony on April 14th. March 18th, Democrats walk out of Bondi's briefing. March 23rd, the deposition is still scheduled. The most disturbing photographs from the 95,000 remain unreleased. Millions of documents remain withheld. And Pam Bondi has not yet appeared under oath. There are three separate investigative threads that need to be understood because they are distinct, but they all converge on the same problem. The first thread is the photographic archive itself. 95,000 photographs with no context provided by the estate. Democrats have released approximately 90 of them. Congressman Garcia has told reporters the most disturbing images involve sexual content, and that the committee is working with survivor advocates to determine how to handle their release. What is in the remaining 94,000 plus photographs is not yet public. What Garcia described as incredibly disturbing is still inside that archive. The archive is real. The committee has it, and the portion that has not been released is, by the committee's own description, more serious than what has been shown. The second thread is the 3 million pages released by the DOJ, and what was withheld or pulled down from that release. Independent investigators and media organizations have identified documents that appear in case file logs but are absent from the public database. The most significant missing documents are the FBI interview records involving allegations against Trump. The government's explanation for those omissions has not satisfied congressional investigators from either party. The third thread is the institutional question: why does the Justice Department, which is legally required to release all of these files, keep finding reasons not to? The department has cited duplicate coding errors. It has cited ongoing investigations. It has cited victim protection protocols. But critics note that the errors consistently involve the same category of document: files that name powerful people who are not yet publicly identified, and specifically files that name the current president. The pattern is specific enough that bipartisan members of Congress voted to place the Attorney General under oath. That is not a standard procedure. That is a significant escalation. Here is what the evidence does not establish, and this distinction matters. The photographs do not prove that any of the prominent individuals pictured participated in Epstein's trafficking operation. Proximity to Epstein was, for a period of years, something that powerful men across the political spectrum considered normal. He had access to the highest levels of finance, academia, science, entertainment, and government. Photographs of people at Epstein's events do not tell us what they knew, what they witnessed, or what they enabled. The FBI interview alleging abuse by the current president is uncorroborated. Trump has denied all wrongdoing. He has not been charged with any crime related to Epstein. The allegation exists in FBI records. The investigation into that allegation was never fully resolved before Epstein's death in 2019. What those records do establish is that a witness told federal investigators what she told them, that those interviews were conducted for times over several months, and that the specific documents containing her later testimony went missing from a public database in a pattern that investigators consider anomalous. What the totality of the evidence does establish is this: Epstein documented his world obsessively and deliberately. He maintained relationships with an extraordinary concentration of powerful people across every major institution in American and global life. When he died in August 2019, officially ruled a suicide, though questions about that determination have never fully been laid to rest. He left behind an archive that the federal government has been actively resisting full transparency on. Despite a law specifically passed to compel that transparency, that resistance is bipartisan in its critics. IT is ongoing, and it is centered specifically on documents that name people who currently hold or have recently held significant institutional power. The survivors of Epstein's trafficking ring number, according to the FBI's own review of the evidence, in excess of 1,000 individuals. 1,000 known victims, women and girls recruited from the United States and Eastern Europe, from poverty and vulnerability, into a network that operated with near-total impunity for decades. Their testimonies exist in those files. Their identities need to be protected. Their trauma does not get resolved by congressional subpoenas or political press releases. But the reason transparency matters, the reason the 95,000 photographs matter, the reason the missing FBI interview records matter, the reason Pam Bondi's deposition on April 14th matters is because impunity for Epstein and those around him was not an accident. It was constructed. It was maintained. It required the cooperation, the indifference, or the active suppression of institutions that were supposed to hold people like him accountable. Understanding exactly how that worked, who helped build it, who benefited from it, and whether any of those mechanisms are still operating is not a political exercise. It is the minimum that the survivors of more than 1,000 documented victims deserve. As of this week, the investigation remains active. Pam Bondi's sworn deposition before the House Oversight Committee is scheduled for April 14th. The committee has also announced plans to depose Darren Indyke and Richard Conn, Epstein's longtime lawyer and accountant who managed his operations for years and who, investigators believe, have detailed knowledge of his finances and the wire transfers reportedly exceeding $1 billion that flowed through his accounts. Leon Bleck, the private equity billionaire who paid Epstein more than $150 million for financial advisory work in the years following Epstein's 2008 conviction, has agreed to testify before the panel. Goldman Sachs executive Karen Petru-Rumler, who also had connections to Epstein, is scheduled to appear. Bill Clinton appeared for a deposition before House Republicans investigating his relationship with Epstein. Clinton has stated publicly that he saw nothing and did nothing wrong. Hillary Clinton was also called but has not yet complied. Democrats on the committee have called for Trump himself to be deposed, a request the White House has not addressed. The 95,000 photographs remain mostly unreleased. The most disturbing portion of that archive, by the committee's own description, has not been shown to the public. And 37 pages of FBI records that NPR identified as missing from the public database remain offline as of the most recent reporting. The Epstein Files Transparency Act was supposed to end the questions. It was supposed to deliver the public a complete record of what the federal government knew about the most prolific sex trafficker in American history and the network that enabled him. 3 months after the law's deadline, what the government has delivered is 3 million pages, significant gaps in the record. An Attorney General subpoenaed by her own party and a congressional walkout. The most powerful men photographed in Epstein's archive have all denied wrongdoing. The institutions that were supposed to hold Epstein accountable, federal prosecutors, the FBI, the courts built the legal framework for the 2008 deal that gave him 13 months in a county jail and let him resume his operations. That framework, built by powerful lawyers, enabled by compliant prosecutors, negotiated over years, is itself part of what the remaining files could document. There is one man, Congressman Garcia told reporters in December, who has the power to release the files and get to the truth and bring justice to the survivors. He was speaking to Trump directly. Whatever was in those 95,000 photographs when Garcia said that in December, whatever he described as incredibly disturbing is still in that archive in March. The deposition is scheduled. The subpoena is issued. The April 14th date is on the calendar. Whether Bondi appears, whether she answers under oath, whether what she says produces any new transparency is what the next month of this story will determine. More than 1,000 documented victims. That number is from the FBI's own review. 1,000. Whatever those 95,000 photographs contain. Whatever the missing FBI interview records reveal. Whatever Bondi says or does not say under oath in April, the question that cannot be deflected by political framing from either party is this: for a network that reached that many victims, operating across that many decades, inside that many powerful institutions, who else knew, who else helped, and what exactly is still being protected? If this case matters to you, and if you have watched this far, IT clearly does hit the like button and subscribe so you do not miss the April 14th deposition coverage. That is the next major moment in this investigation, and it could produce sworn testimony that changes what we know about how the Justice Department handled the Epstein files. Leave a comment with your analysis. Do you believe Pam Bondi will actually appear under oath on April 14th? And what do you think she will say about those missing documents? And share this video with anyone who thinks the Epstein files have already been fully released, because the evidence says they have not.